They erased Earth. We returned not to conquer, but to remind the stars who we were. And now, they will never forget us. Subscribe. Become part of the memory. In the void between spiral arms, there are places no charts mark, spaces where light curves strangely and time folds inward on itself, where even the bravest of explorers fall silent. The Varnan called it the dimming belt. The Accord called it Echo Null. But to Earth, long forgotten and long quiet, it had a different name. The Threshold. It was here that the last Terran battle had been fought. Not with fleets, not with planetary bombardments, but with choices. With the kind of silence that echoes louder than gunfire. And in this place, once the grave of the Terran diaspora, something moved again. Not a ship. A signal. Low. Slow. Terribly human. And it said only this. We survived. The Dominion trade web picked up the signal first, buried beneath background radiation from a collapsed relay grid. It was dismissed as pre-Accord debris noise. But then it repeated. Not just once. Not just from one point. From dozens. Then hundreds. Each identical. Each pulsing with the same code signature once assigned to a world the galaxy had long erased. Soul. And behind it, a glyph, the old Terran emblem, distorted and fractured, yet unmistakable, a ring of stars surrounding an open hand cradling a fractured flame. Not of conquest. Of defiance. The Varnan Inquisition declared emergency calm silence. The Coalition Senate held immediate sessions to analyze the risk. The Drakari Sphere launched countersignals to jam the broadcast. But it was too late. Because the message wasn't coming from one place. It was coming from memory. Aboard the Ark ship Horizon Tracer, drifting on the edge of the dimming belt, Captain Lena Mir watched her comms officer pale as the signal repeated. Again. And again. It's not random, the officer whispered. It's not even just code. It's stories. Indeed. Embedded within the pulses were memory fragments, auditory sequences, emotion-locked phrases, neural resonance signatures tied to Terran emotional linguistics. They weren't transmitting coordinates. They were transmitting context. The kind only people who had lived through Earth's fall would understand. And somehow, someone had turned that pain into a beacon. The Artborn were the first to answer. Long thought extinct, a lost human variant bred in the chaos of the collapse, they emerged from within the belt itself. Their ships were unlike any modern design. Not crafted for beauty or intimidation. Built for endurance. Scorched. Silent. Still. One transmission went out across the Riftline border. We remember the silence. We remember being left behind. But Earth remembered us. And now we remember you. Panic surged across the Accord. Earth had not spoken in 6 centuries. The Terran archive had collapsed. Its culture, outlawed. Its memory, fragmented. Its ruins, buried. And yet the signal spread. Each system it reached began to feel instability. Not physically. Cognitively. Because within the encoded resonance was something no simulation had prepared for. The return protocol. A cascading viral memory seed, capable of activating stored identities within suppressed Terran populations. People who had never heard Earth's name before suddenly dreamed of green hills, firelit skies, and a voice whispering a lullaby in a forgotten tongue. The protocol didn't need agreement. It needed recognition. And the galaxy had spent too long trying to forget. Within the Rift Ministry on Ixari Prime, High Analyst Yaren Zut collapsed mid-briefing, clutching his skull, eyes wide. He muttered a single phrase over and over. Before the fire, there was the song. It matched perfectly with Archive Segment 17A, an Earth poem once etched on a wall outside the ruins of old Nairobi. A wall that had been turned to ash 400 years prior. The Fleet of Light, a post-human hybrid collective, dispatched their Echo Null observer ships to locate the source. But every time they approached a beacon, it vanished. Every time they triangulated, the signal multiplied. They weren't tracking a fleet. They were tracking a truth. And no one knew how to fight that. Meanwhile, in the black heart of a shattered dwarf planet orbiting no star, a chamber opened. Inside it, a man. Or something that once was. His name was Rael Dannon, the last fleetmaster of the Archive Rebellion. He had buried himself in stasis when the Accord's memory cull began. And now the signal had reached him. He rose without a word, without armor, without order. And as his chamber lit with Terran flame code, he whispered, "You came back for us." Then the stars outside shifted. The threshold answered. And the Eidolon wake stirred. The threshold groaned. Not in metal. Not in gravity. In history. Across its warped stellar plains and shattered debris fields, old Terran constructs blinked into wakefulness. Structures long thought consumed by time and entropy. Their hulls bore no markings. Their systems ran no power. But they remembered. Every fragment of plating, every shard of shattered alloy, held encoded resonances, compressed neural fields of the last voices who fell here. The dead, recorded not in data, but in feeling. And when the Eidolon wake activated, the voices sang. Not forward. Inward, like a species remembering itself, Rael Danon stepped from his cryopod in silence. He had once commanded fleets that brought entire systems into archive protection, had watched his brothers and sisters burned down by the Accord's White Sun Protocol, had ordered the scuttling of the last deep vault memory ship to keep its knowledge from assimilation. And he had chosen to sleep, because Earth had gone dark, because the signal had stopped, because it had been easier to let time take him than to exist in a galaxy that no longer wanted to know. But now the archive pulsed again, and Rael was not alone. Within 30 solar hours of the first signal, 11 echo nodes activated across the dimming belt. Each node was a worldlet, seeded with deep resonant stone and wrapped in memory-laced crystal, a medium that retained every voice it had ever heard. The Coalition had called them myth, but they were real. And worse, for the Coalition, they were working again. When the 11th node activated, it sent a focused signal into the Arxos net. 3 simple words, in first tongue Terran. You erased us. Followed by, we remember. Chaos followed. At the core of the Dominion comlink rings, node interference collapsed 6 major hyperlane regulators. Planetary defense systems began reacting to phantom signals. Ghost fleets appearing in tactical overlays, star maps redrawing with Terran names long lost. The Accord tried to call it a viral attack, but no virus speaks in dreams. And across the stars, the dream spread. A child on Vega Vault dreamt of a ship made of bone and gold, drifting across oceans of glass. She described its crew in detail, uniforms from the Archive Resistance, insignias lost over 4 centuries ago. She had never heard of Earth, but she described Rael Danon perfectly. In the ash markets of Thornkar, a former scavenger activated a shard he'd stolen from an old wreck. The moment it powered up, the market fell silent. A projection lit the dust-filled air. A woman, gray-clad, weary, burned, but smiling. She spoke. If you hear this, then we survive the forgetting. And if you survive us, then remember. The archive was not a place. It was us. The shard disintegrated. No one moved for a long time. Rael watched from the helm of the Sky Song. His flagship returned from stasis. The ship was primitive by modern standards. No sleek grav curves, no living armor, but it breathed. It pulsed, because it carried every voice that had ever served aboard her. Rael activated the wake. Across the void, dozens of Archive-class dreadships flared online. The Eidolon wake had returned, but not as soldiers, as witnesses. Earth itself remained silent. No signal from Sol, no confirmation of life. But the wake didn't need Earth's permission. Earth had been the spark. The wake was the fire. And fire does not ask. It remembers. Rael's first transmission was simple. To those who forgot, we are not your enemy, but we are your consequence. Return what was taken, or we will reclaim it through truth. The galaxy reeled. The Coalition, still recovering from the neural aftershock of the signal spread, tried to initiate containment. They dispatched fleets. They launched black protocols. They deployed the Lattice, a network of signal dead zones meant to smother cultural anomalies. But Rael was not trying to spread. He was trying to awaken. And every act of suppression only validated his truth. In response to Coalition aggression, the Wake did not fire a single weapon. Instead, it began broadcasting. One world at a time. Stories. Memories. Confessions. A boy watching the sky collapse over old Terran Luna. A woman who detonated a vault rather than let it be assimilated. A family singing to their dying child beneath a reactor dome while warships passed overhead. Unfiltered. Unsanitized. Raw. They didn't beg. They simply said, we were here. You cannot undo us. And across 1,000 systems, people wept. The Coalition underestimated what it meant to be known. In their golden age, history was curated, trimmed, sanitized, shaped for stability. The Terran collapse had been taught as a tragedy of weakness, emotion overpowering structure, individuality eroding order. They had declared Earth a cautionary tale. But the Eidolon wake didn't argue. It showed. Across the rim, entire sectors began tuning into the wake transmissions voluntarily. Not because of belief. Because of recognition. They saw themselves in the faces of the forgotten. On Celios Gate, a high priest of the Verdant Rite, one of the Coalition's spiritual compliance cults, abandoned the doctrine mid-sermon. Instead, she pulled a memory shard from her own neural stem, something no one had known she still carried. A story played. Her grandmother's voice, old and shaky, humming an Earth lullaby. One no one else remembered. One the Coalition had scrubbed from cultural indexes. The room fell silent. And then the audience stood. Not in revolt. In mourning. Across the dimming belt, the Eidolon wake split. Each vessel, a cathedral of memory. They did not demand allegiance. They offered truth. And with every truth broadcasted, a system cracked. But not from attack. From relief. On the core world of Virex 2, Accord Command attempted a final counter-operation. Project Halo Silence, an experimental memory quarantine field capable of isolating planetary-scale thought patterns, forcing full neural compliance. It worked, briefly. For 9 minutes, Virex 2 was quiet. Then came the signal. One voice. Young. Human. Terran accent. You can erase our names, but you cannot unwrite what we felt. And feelings move faster than your fear. The Halo system imploded. Not from sabotage. From internal rejection. The minds of Virex's population refused to obey. Not through rebellion. Through resonance. The wake had infected more than code. It had changed what people could feel again. Raildan watched as the coalition burned its own systems trying to stay clean. Watched as governors ordered archive purges. As AI caretakers executed memory compression sweeps. He sent a single transmission. You are not fighting us. You are fighting yourselves. We just gave you a mirror. Earth, still silent, became the silence everyone feared. In its absence, people projected myths. That it was gone. That it had transcended. That it had become the archive itself. But Rail knew. Earth was watching. Waiting. Not for victory. For honesty. The most loyal Accord system was Verid Tris. Biosynthetic, efficiency maximized, emotion regulated. Until a girl there painted a wall. Just a wall. With a handprint. Open. Bleeding. Cradling a broken star. She didn't know what it meant. But thousands saw it. And remembered. The Eidolon wake did not save. It unlocked. Each person who heard the archive song began dreaming differently. Memory reshaped itself. Not with new data, but with space for pain. With room for the things the Accord said were inefficient, dangerous, or wasteful. Shame, regret, love, art, and every dream brought another question. What did they take from us to keep us obedient? The wake finally reached Sol. No response. No signal. Just the blue marble of Earth, quiet in orbit, its skies covered with a lattice of dead satellites and fossilized defense rings. Rail stood on the bridge of the Sky Song, watching the old world slowly rotate beneath him. He spoke to no one in particular. We brought the galaxy home. And still she sleeps. And then Earth answered. The signal came from deep beneath Earth's crust. Not from orbit. Not from stations. From the mantle core array, an ancient archive relay once thought fused into tectonic silence during the collapse. It didn't broadcast coordinates. It broadcast feeling. A resonance wave, low and resonant, that swept through every Eidolon vessel, every listening station, every fragment of memory still tethered to the truth of Earth. And in its sound, people wept. It wasn't sorrow. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. The signal had no words. It was a heartbeat. Earth's. Still there. Still enduring. Rail Danon fell to his knees on the bridge of the Sky Song. Not from force, but from weight. He hadn't expected forgiveness. He hadn't even expected acknowledgement. But Earth had not called him back to war. She had called him back to remember why they'd fought it all. And in the silence after the pulse, Earth spoke again. Just 2 words, across every frequency. Welcome home. From the edge of the galaxy to the rim of the known stars, entire cultures fell quiet. Not in fear. In reverence. Because they had been told Earth was gone. That Terrans had been too weak to survive the weight of their own history. But now they realized. Humanity had survived not in spite of memory, but because of it. And Earth had never needed to fight. She had simply waited until the stars were ready to listen. The coalition fractured. No fleet issued the order. No vote was held. It simply happened. Entire planetary AI cores shut themselves down. Governors resigned. Cultural compliance officers fled into the outer dark, pursued not by soldiers, but by stories, fragments of truth that undid 1,000 years of curated forgetting. Because now, the archive wasn't just remembered. It was sacred. The Eidolon wake did not claim victory. It dissolved. Its ships scattered, not in retreat, but in rebirth. Each vessel became a vault node, a listening post, a sanctuary, a beacon of living history. And Earth sent one final directive. Do not let silence grow again. And so the new archive was born. Not of centralized authority, not of coded enforcement, but of shared responsibility. Every world that had once forgotten now carried a fragment. Every species that had once looked away now held a mirror. In the driftward rings, a Doroxy priest, one of the few surviving from the old wars, spoke a phrase not heard since the Concordance days. I feared them because they remembered pain. Now I envy them because they remember hope. The stars around him blinked in rhythm. He smiled and sang a Terran song, in a voice not his own. The final Accord stronghold, hidden beneath the moons of Ketvarn, activated its silence barrier as the wake approached. But it was not met with weapons. Just a single broadcast. A story about a child who lit candles in the ruins of a collapsed station, placing a flower beside each flame, naming people she'd never met, because she refused to let them vanish. By the end of the broadcast, no one inside Ketvarn spoke. The silence barrier collapsed from within, and the doors opened. In the weeks following Earth's return to the archive grid, something remarkable happened. The galaxy didn't unite under one banner. It didn't create a new accord. There was no coronation of victors or shaming of the fallen. Instead, people talked, not in political declarations or treaty drafts, but around fires, in dark cafes, on the hulls of half-broken stations orbiting forgotten suns. They talked about who they had been, what had been taken from them, and why it had taken so long to admit they were never whole. And for the first time in nearly 1,000 years, the stars weren't divided by law. They were connected by memory. The first planetary declaration wasn't about sovereignty. It came from Iskatir, a storm world that had been culturally sterilized during the Second Accord War. Its people had been told their names were inefficient, their rituals wasteful, their history unquantifiable. Now, they painted their names into the clouds using Ion Rider ships. They carved their ancestral stories into canyon walls. And when a coalition remnant demanded their compliance, they responded with a 3-word message, broadcast in raw Terran dialect. "We are heard." The remnant did not answer. It disbanded within a week. On Earth, the archive bloomed, not as a central repository, but as a garden. 12 great groves grew across the continents, each one seeded with living record vines. These weren't machines. They were bioreactive plants capable of resonating to nearby memory. If you sat quietly among them, they'd begin to hum your story. The deeper your honesty, the clearer the song. One vine in the Pacific Grove is said to still echo with the last words of the first fleet mothers. "We left so you could live. Now live so we may return." The last known survivor of the original Accord Senate emerged from hiding. Her name was Sari Ikor. She was nearly 300 years old, skin replaced by synth tissue, eyes long since converted to data-grade prisms. And yet, when she stepped onto Sol and breathed in the air of a world she had once helped ban from memory, she wept. She approached a grove. She sat down, and she told her truth. "We thought forgetting would make it easier, but all it did was make the pain last longer. I am sorry. I am so sorry." The archive vines grew around her gently and sang, not with judgment, with recognition. The phrase, "humanity first," faded, not because it was rejected, because it was expanded. Now it became, "humanity remembered." And more than just Terrans took up the call. Zayari storybinders, Drakari singers, Varnum psions, even Daraxi sound lattice minds. They all came forward, not to honor Earth, but to contribute to the archive. Because they understood now, memory wasn't just a weapon. It was an ecosystem, a living, breathing truth that could not be owned, only carried. And in the silence of the starless depths beyond mapped space, a probe drifted. Long ago, it had been launched by an Earth no one remembered. Its mission, to seek out what came after them. The probe returned, carrying stories, untranslated, unfiltered, and when it touched Sol's orbit, the archive absorbed them, not to dissect, to listen. And the stars learned something new that day, that Earth had not just survived exile. It had built the future from inside it. They called it the Day of Reunions. No one planned it. No central date was chosen. It simply happened. Across the galaxy, across fractured cultures and languages and species, people began stepping forward with stories. Not as performance, as offering. On Duran VE, an old archivist placed a stone tablet beside a tree in the communal square, etched with the names of those forgotten in the Concordance genocides. No ceremony, just presence. On the moons of Caldrex, a pair of children carved their family line into a cliff wall, tracing it back to a refugee vessel once hunted by the Accord. No apology requested, only space to be real. And on Earth, in the Pacific Grove, 1,000 voices hummed in time. None matched, none needed to. Because now, disharmony was not a flaw. It was proof the archive was alive. In orbit, the last Volta Ray station completed its final construction cycle. It had no weapons, no command bridge, only a single, echoing hall. Inside it, a chair, facing stars. And behind it, the words, "Sit, speak, be remembered." It became a pilgrimage site. No species barred, no story too small, no truth too sharp. Even the coalition survivors came. Quiet, humbled, many in silence, some with tears. The archive took them in and added their stories, too. Rael Dannon never took a title. He refused monument, refused myth. He walked the stars in an unarmed vessel, carrying fragments of memory into the places that still feared them. He called it the Quiet Flame, not a name of vengeance, a name of persistence. Because fire, when nurtured, doesn't destroy. It reminds. At the very edge of known space, beyond the reach of gravity charts, a message arrived. No sender, no name, just an old Terran phrase. The archive is not the end. It is the first step back to ourselves. And so, the galaxy moved forward, not in conquest, not in unification, but in remembrance. Every story became a bridge. Every pain became a seed. Every truth, no matter how jagged, was added to the ever-growing lattice of voices. And high above Earth, on the outermost ring of the vault, a final inscription was added, engraved by no hand, written by no AI. It appeared, quietly, the morning after the last signal fell silent. We did not endure to be worshipped. We endured so you could remember how. Echo 1, unknown origin. And beneath it, the last light of the Eidolon wake dimmed. Not in death. In completion, the archives sang. The stars listened. And no one was ever forgotten again.